What's your GPA? Way smart, right? That's just academic stuff.
All right. We will finish the semester today. It did not take me as long to get through them as I thought. I probably will be done long before the hour's over. So, as I said, I'm not going to give you any work from this chapter other than the notes. So once you get those in, you are good. Now, that said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send out tomorrow I'm going to give out a study guide if you so desire to do it. I will use it as a type of extra credit if you want. There'll also be a Kahoot. Now, I have told you guys, I think I've told you this before. If you've had me, you've heard this speech, so just act like you haven't. I am not a big believer in final exams. In history, it's more conceptual than like little individual facts. I understand if it's like something like math or science where it's a building of knowledge. It's not that in history. You can totally miss a chapter and still get the idea of what's going on. Does that make sense? When you get to college, they're not going to give you history exams, but we have to give exams. They're going to give you like a final presentation or a final project. So, since I think it's stupid, I'm pretty much going to give you a Kahoot with all the answers. So just study that and you'll be fine. All right? Do we understand each other?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, look at me, and this is incredibly important. Please put your phones away and close your Chromebooks. You should know this, but this is 20% of your grade. So don't play around with this. Do I wish I could make it 0 points of your grade? Yes. But it is what it is. That's a district-wide policy. I can't change that. So we're going to spend this week after today just deal with that. You're going to come in every day. I'm going to run the Kahoot. You can play it, not play it. It's up to you. You can work on the study guide. But pretty much you have a week to get prepared for however you learn best is how I want you to learn. I may even have a Quizlet for it. I'll have to look around and see if I do, because it's actually been 2 years since I've taught American history. When they give it back to me this year, which they took freshman away from me, freshman world history, which I was so devastated when they did. See the tear going down. So I was very happy to get this back. So that said, let's cover this, and then, like I said, we'll get into it. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, what you're supposed to be looking at. This is civilization before the Civil War. What do you not see out here? No people, right? If you get to California, there's a bunch of people out there. At the time of the Civil War, California was a state that was in as like everything up to the Mississippi and then nothing. After the war, you see people starting to pop in. Okay. Now, the first group of people to go right before the Civil War. They find something out in California that makes everybody go lose their flipping mind. Gold rush. Now, it's funny, everybody in history remembers, oh, the great gold rushes. Do you know how much gold was actually found in the United States? Very little. As far as natural resources go, not us. You go down to Mexico, do they have a lot of gold? Oh yeah, that's how the Spanish Empire got so big. We find a little bit of gold, so everybody goes out there looking for gold. Now, when they don't find it, they do find something else, silver, and we do have a ton of silver and actually tin in our in the Rocky Mountains, and they are successfully mining that. Okay. Can't really see it, but there's this guy digging more holes in a second. Mining is a sucky life because you're in there. Now, whether you want to or not, you dig long enough, you're going to come across coal. Why do you come across coal? Because coal is made by pressure on dead things, and it turns it into coal. And it turns quickly. So when you strike coal, it puts off dust. You get dust in your lungs. Now, even though we speak miners, is this how most mining was done back then? Very little. Most people who are miners, have you ever seen the panners? If you go out to Colorado, by the Colorado River, they'll actually let you go out there and pan for gold. And if you're okay, you'll go and do it. Because you'll sit there and you'll be there for like 3 days and you're not going to get it. If you do get something, if you get a little bit of gold dust, you may, get enough to get you like 75 cents. That's the excitement of gold and all that stuff. It's basically a way of tourist thing to rent the pans and all this stuff and go out and sit in the water. All right, now, early on, there were some places. Now it's kind of funny. They call it Leadville. The reason they named this place Leadville is because they wanted people to think they were pulling lead out of there and not silver. So all the miners kept going away from the town of Leadville. This is one of the most successful mines in history. And over a period of 40 years, they had pulled out over $270 million worth of gold and $400 million of silver. So they may have been a little successful. But for every one guy that you had that was successful, you had about 4,000 that were not. Basically, they made enough gold dust to keep themselves alive. This is one, other than us killing off the Native Americans, one of the greatest crimes of the West is hydraulic mining. What they would do, instead of digging a hole down in the ground to find them, they would just take pipes, put them in the river, let them fill with water, run them downhill, and keep getting the pipe smaller and smaller and smaller. And if you do that, what's going to happen to the water when it comes out the end? High pressure, they just shoot it at the side of a hill, they just erode it down until they find the metals they want. Now, the problem with this, it completely destroys the environment. It killed off a bunch of natural animals. It just looked horrendous. It made Colorado look like Kansas, which is not a compliment. Anybody ever been to Kansas? I apologize first of all. Once you get past Kansas City, Kansas, and Lawrence, there's nothing but flat forever and ever. And then you go far enough that it's not even green anymore, it's just brown. But we'll get back to that in a minute. Okay, now, when these mining towns pop up, it is rough. When you have large amounts of gold around, are you going to have thieves? Are you going to have people shooting other people? You get these, this is where your Wild West comes in. This is where your gunfighters come because they had to defend their stuff. You would usually, the worst gunfighter in town would be hired to be the sheriff because everybody would be afraid of them. Now, if the sheriff took his role seriously, you had a good, clean town. If you didn't, That's where you had the problems, like they bring in their gang and they run the town. So you either had like a really tough time, like the towns that were run by like Wild Bill Hickok or oh come on, Wyatt Earp, who basically had been gunfighters, but basically made a career as a marshal, and you didn't fight with them because they'd kill you. I mean, they were, I mean, like Wyatt Earp had like 38 kills to his name in gunfights. That counted as time of the Civil War. But things were crazy out there. Now, what you don't have is any government. It's just like, remember when the colonists landed, they didn't have any government. People try to set up their own, but it doesn't really take because people don't stay places very long because they're miners, they move around. Does that make sense? So it's kind of screwed up. Now, the only thing that's going for them is the railroad. Remember how important I told you it was when we got that bridge across the Mississippi River? Up to that point, you're going to see another map there where all the rail lines are going across Iowa because Iowa, up in Iowa, the Mississippi River is not near as big. We never would have been anything had the Eads Bridge not been built. We started out being important because everybody used to travel by river, but when people start traveling by rail, we lose importance until the Eads Bridge gets built, and then we joined the Transcontinental Railroad, and the Transcontinental Railroad went through St. Louis. Oh, okay. The people who made the most out of this land were cattle farmers. And we'll get back to this in a minute. The Texas ranchers found that Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado was great for raising cattle. Now, unfortunately, there's a big animal out there that likes to eat the grass that's out there. What am I talking about? What? What did you say? Somebody said that. Buffalo. What did he say? All right, now, here's a little mining town popped up. All right, now, you have these cow towns pop up, Kansas City and Chicago, where they set these big slaughterhouses to where the cattle would be driven to Kansas City. Some of it was butchered there, and not the cattle were shipped out to Chicago. They were slaughtered there, and they pretty much distributed beef throughout the nation. Now, there is a great side effect to this. If you like a good steak, if you're ever in Chicago or in Kansas City, I'm telling you, you're not going to find much better steak than there. They claim out in Texas it's real good. Nah. All right. See the cows getting off the train. Dodge City, the cow town, and basically a place to get shot. Okay. This was ranchers were fighting over this, and they had to pass the Homestead Act because people keep trying to farm this. Now, here's the thing: the Great Plain, where we are at the beginning of the Great Plain and it goes up. It's flat, but once you get about halfway through Kansas, the state stops being green and it turns brown. People would try to go out to that flat land and think, oh, it's going to be awesome. We can farm. But if you're so many feet above sea level, you cannot farm. You'll get a little bit of grass, but farms will not go. People went out there all the time trying to make it go, and nothing good ever came out of it. So what you do is when you get over here to the west, the cattlemen are over there, the farmers are on the side. I don't know why anybody ever tried to farm anything in Oklahoma because Oklahoma's brown and nothing grows. It's the desert in the middle of the plains. There's your homestead certificate. If you were a homesteader, this is how awesome your life was. You had no building supplies. There are no trees, so you can't cut down trees to make your house. So you had to carry wood all the way out there, and then you made your house out of sod. What is sod? Not great. It's like you cut dirt and the mud out, and you make your walls out of it. Now, what's the added disadvantage of having a house made out of dirt?
Water.
One, water goes through it, and your house can actually collapse on you. If you're in a rainy season, it literally will get heavier and you'll die. Two, what lives in the grass and mud? Bugs, snakes, all that stuff. Was that in your house? Not to mention your house was completely filthy all the time. Because it's mud. Now, this one is built above ground, which is a kind of dangerous thing. Because by this time, the Native Americans have pushed off land for over 100 years. They're no longer the nice Native Americans who want to trade with us. They're pissed off and want to kill you now. Out here, you got the Comanche and the Apache and the Sioux and the Blackfoot and the Cherokee. Now, if you were smart, you'd find a hill and dig into the side of the hill, tunnel it out, put up your supports, and that was great because if nobody could see your front door, they left you alone. All right, now, these things would collapse all the time. Anyway, enough of the sod houses. You lived out in the middle of nowhere, and unless you were in eastern Kansas or Nebraska, your farm didn't take, and you were constantly fighting to keep your crops alive. And what's that Midwestern weather thing that happens here that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world?
Snow in the season.
Oh, you got huge snow in the winter. But I'm talking about the springtime. We do drills for it. Tornadoes. Tornadoes would rip through those valleys and kill people off left and right. All right. Now, here you have the homestead. Droughts, tornadoes, constant problems. 60% of people tried, failed miserably. All right. Now, the one thing about the West, a lot of former slaves, instead of staying in the South, in the Jim Crow South, or facing racism in the big cities, went out and made a good life for themselves. Matter of fact, former slaves go out to Oklahoma. Guys, pay attention. In Tulsa. Hello. Tulsa was such a city of great former slaves built the city up where it was great. For a long time, it was actually called Black Wall Street because you have former slaves who were millionaires who had made so much money. And unfortunately, it ends because after the Indian Wars and after the Civil War, these former Confederates move out there and say, why do these black people own everything? And basically, if you've never heard about it, look it up because we don't have time to go into it, but the Tulsa Massacre. Basically, hundreds of African Americans were killed just for the fact that they were running successful businesses, which is one of the saddest pages of our national history, right up there with pretty much making the Native Americans extinct. All right. Things got so bad that we just started recruiting people to come to Kansas. Now, Kansas, if you were a former slave, was a great place for former slaves to go because Kansas had been a state on the forefront of trying to keep slavery out of the West. All right. We finally get the Transcontinental Railroad. We talked before about immigrants. Now, if you look at this map, before the Transcontinental was built, which is going to come up here, you got all these lines that come across because, like I said, it's easier to get across the Mississippi up north. That would change later on. Transcontinental Railroad were built by Irish and by Chinese workers. Afton has its origin as an Irish town. A lot of the immigrants who were coming over would stop in St. Louis before they would go on to build the Transcontinental Railroad. St. Louis was one of the places they stopped. The same thing happened from the east. Chinese were coming over, fearing political persecution from their government, came to San Francisco and started working on the railway coming the other way. They finally meet. President Grant rides the railroad out there and drives the Golden Stake in there. No, they did not leave the Golden Stake out there. They pulled it out and put it in the museum. And then we could get across the country within a day or two. Then you see the railroad lines build and build and build. Now, if you see all these ones that just went across, they don't become much. They all come back through St. Louis and everything is here. Now, if you were really, really rich, you got your own little luxury train car, and you'd hook it up whenever you wanted to travel. We already talked about this last chapter, but this is where all the immigrants were coming from. Now, after the railroad was built, we have another recent history. We have the Chinese Immigration Act, which basically limits how much Chinese can come in and basically stops the Chinese immigrants because it was believed that these businesses the Chinese were setting up were taking jobs away from Americans. Although the Chinese have been there generations, they're also Americans, but basically starts kicking Chinese people out. You get to the point where all the states are getting settled. Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Oklahoma are left for Native American lands. If you just look at the different tribes that were wiped out, this is what it would look like before white settlers. If you look at all these, the Wampanoag, who are in Massachusetts, end up in Oklahoma. The Seminoles end up in New Mexico from Florida. The Cherokee, which are like Ohio Valley, are up in South Dakota. And basically, the Native Americans just get pissed off and like, we've had enough of this. Where they would be like, okay, we want to be friends. Now they don't want to be friends anymore. And here's the funny thing. The white settlers are surprised that after people get pushed off land for 100 years, that they're a little pissed off. All right. Now, notice about the buffalo. The buffalo was one of the most dominant life forms on this continent before we start to settle the West. A Native American family would live off 2 buffalo for an entire year. Between the meat, they would use everything that's from the hide would make blankets. The skin would be made like skins for teepees, water bladders for water. The bones were used to build tents. Everything was used. Watching a Native American family take apart a buffalo and use it was like watching the military in an exercise. It was just performance like you would not believe. Then, when buffalo became popular to white settlers, they got, oh, that buffalo hide's really neat. You have white settlers coming in and shooting buffaloes. And this, by the way, you can see the migration of the southern tribes, the Cherokee and the Chickasaw being pushed out to Oklahoma. This originally was Native American territory, but then they decided they wanted it, so then they moved them again. Manifest Destiny is the idea that the United States gets to go from sea to sea because, hey, we're awesome and we deserve it. Then all the mining ties start to pop up. And then the Native Americans just have enough, and then we start the Indian Wars. We fight the Sioux. With Chief Joseph, we fight Geronimo. let's see what it is, Kicking Bird, a couple of, basically, there's Geronimo. Now, here's the problem. They stop, they hunt the buffalo, and they skin them and just leave their carcasses right in on the landscape. Let me get ahead here. See this train car that's going up? Those are all buffalo hide. Those are buffalo skulls. Now, look at this map right here. This is where all the buffalo were. It was estimated that there were 65 million buffalo living in the United States. By the time this happens, there are less than 1,000. We are lucky that a few ranchers decided to let the buffalo live on their ranches because when the tourists would come out, they want to see buffalo. Now, they weren't doing it up there, sorry, they were making money off it. But had that not happened, the buffalo would have gone extinct. Now the buffalo is up to a high enough population to off the extinction list. Now, who was happy that all this happened? The cattle farmers, because now their cattle can graze all those territories. All right, Battle of Wounded Knee. Now, what you have, they actually bring General Grant out of retirement to come and fight. Native Americans got so fierce, they knew they were going to eventually be killed off, so they started doing what was known as the ghost dances. We would rather die with honor than be put in a reservation and live with no honor. And they fought fiercely and killed off a lot of white people. This is when you see them go through just savage towns and just kill off people because they're pissed off. We covered that. And if you notice, the West keeps changing. Like in the 1700s, this was the West. The 1800s, this was the West. In the late 1800s, this is the West. And it just keeps moving and moving. So eventually we get the Louisiana territory, we get the California, the Oregon territory. This is something different. Texas was owned by Mexico. They get their independence and they want to be part of the United States. We tell them, no, we can't do it right now because we don't want to piss off Mexico, because we're already fighting in Spain. However, the Texas is unique because Texas is the only country in the nation to be its own country before it became a state. They become the independent Republic of Texas, and then later on we take them into the Union. All right, now some of the problems. You have the train coming through, and basically you have all these bankers laying down because they own all these rail lines. They foreclose people's farms to build the railroad. Crop rates are getting high, shipping rates are high. At this time, the government goes away from coins and goes to paper money. You have greenbacks. This is what we still have. All right, now you have a couple of things that happen. Remember, the big businessmen pretty much rule the country. The president does not. Railroads seem to own everything. Banks seem to own everything. The little man is getting squashed by everybody, and people start to get pissed off. So much so that they don't feel the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are meeting their needs. They abandon those parties, and they create a new party called the Populist Party. What do? They believe in getting rid of the income tax. They want regulations on the big businesses and the monopolies that are costing them all kinds of money, because every time the farmer sells his crops, it costs us as much to ship them as he's going to make off his crops. And they want to directly elect their senators because corruption was so bad with the senators. Now, here's the other thing. all the gold and silver that's being found. You want people to back the greenbacks with gold or silver. Now, look up here, guys. If you ever see a dollar bill that's weird looking and has a big silver one on it, has anybody ever seen a silver certificate? If you ever get a chance to find one, do not let it go. They're very valuable. If you find a $1 bill that's in good condition, it's worth about $25 to a collector. If you find like a $50 or $100 bill, you're talking a couple of thousand. Because they've taken them out of circulation, because what used to happen, money was either back, it was either a gold certificate or a silver certificate. You take in that bill to a bank, and they would pull out little gold or silver bars and pay you in gold or silver. Now, is our money backed up that way now? The only thing that makes our money worth what it says it is the fact that you believe it is. We don't have enough gold and silver to back up the money we have. Now, for a while, there was a big push to say which is the best metal to put things on, gold or silver. You have the silverites and the gold bugs. If you've ever heard of McKinley, that's their nickname, because McKinley was a gold bug. Now, the most successful the populists ever were was in the election of 1892, because they actually win some states. However, it doesn't change anything. Now, what it did do was put Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland was the first president who ever won the presidency, then he lost the presidency, and he came back and won it again. He's the only one whose two terms weren't together. Now, the next election, you got McKinley versus William Jennings Bryan. He was a gold standard guy. He was a silver more, a bimetallist, meaning he wanted both metals to be used. He gives this big speech when he's campaigning called the Cross of Gold, that America should not be crucified on a cross of gold, it should be bimetallist. Now, this became such a big thing, I guarantee you will want to see a movie that deals with this. And you don't know he did. How many of you ever seen The Wizard of Oz? That's what it's all about. All right, now, after the election of 1896, populism dies. The Democrats take back over those areas. However, some of the things, there's still some lasting things. One, we have direct election of senators, but there are some reforms that are put in, but not much. Now, the populist allegory, if you've ever seen this movie, this is all about the debate over gold and silver. And to break your hearts, the ruby slippers aren't really anything. Okay, Dorothy was the American people, the plucky people who are never down. You get the Tin Man, those are the Eastern workers. The Cowardly Lion is William Jennings Bryan, because he's afraid of the gold standard. The Scarecrow are the Western farmers, you know how they're always afraid. The Land of Oz is all about the gold. Emerald City, that's the greenbacks, the national money. The Wizard is President McKinley, because he's supposed to be real smart. The Yellow Brick Road obviously is gold. Dorothy's slippers were not ruby, they were silver. When they made the movie in color in the 1930s, they wanted to stand out, so they made them red. And the Good Witch of the South was populist. That's the South. The Wicked Witch of the East were all the Eastern bankers, like J.P. Morgan. Okay. And that is all I have for you today. I will get you your study guides tomorrow and your all right.